On, right? Yeah, of course. السلام عليكم، صباح الخير. دكتورة درا، احنا جاهزين. دكتور واشنطن, the floor is yours. So, great. Well, good morning, everyone. We are in day 3 of our workshop, our week-long workshop, and we've been talking about accreditation and academic quality assurance, and the advancement of academic quality. And last time we were together, we focused more on working to determine that our programs are at the appropriate level of higher education. And near the end of our session, we began to make the connection between programs and courses. And we worked to illustrate that connection. And then we used a chart to show how program outcomes connect to courses and how we introduce those outcomes, we reinforce them, and we assess them. Though one of your colleagues brought to my attention this morning that there's another model that introduces, reinforces, and then the third category is mastery. Mastering the outcome and demonstrating mastery, which is similar to showing, from our perspective, assessment. But I like the concept of mastery and how that gets introduced into the model. So I was saying to myself this morning, I may have to take that back as an advancement suggestion to my team, that we change assessment to mastery, demonstrating mastery. So today we're going to talk about the unique role of learning outcomes that go from programs to courses and why our accrediting bodies are concerned about this. But I'm going to go deeper with you. I'm going to say, let's concentrate on courses. What is a course? Let's talk about course outcomes, and then we're going to get into the design of curriculum. And then we're going to talk about the assessment of curriculum. Now, the accrediting bodies aren't deeply concerned about this, but they're concerned about how you take what you've learned from assessment and how you make improvements into it, which ultimately goes back to what do you do in your courses. So that's why we're going to deep dive into courses today, right? But what's funny is when I went to school and when I studied my bachelor's, master's, doctoral degree, no one really told me about courses and what constitutes a course or what makes up a course, what critical elements are involved in a course. But my faculty really struggled with this and came up with some common ideas for our university. And you will see that we have templates for this now. So we're going to talk about what makes up a course with you today. We're going to start with that idea, the concept of a course. And we're going to flow it down through to activities and assessment. Those are some of the things that we're going to do. We're going to look at course outcomes and course outcome standards. We relied somewhat on Bloom's taxonomy for programs, but it's even more important when we get into the course level, this Bloom's taxonomy, to provide us with an aid to coming up with very solid course outcomes that are written at the right level. We're going to consider a developmental approach to curriculum. I said to you during day 1 that whether you consider yourself a course designer or not, you're designing courses, you're designing curriculum. It can be a haphazard design, or it could be a very deliberate design. I think the best of us are involved in deliberate design. We are very intentional about what we're trying to achieve with our learners and the kind of experiences that help them learn and help them get there. So we're going to go from course outcomes to content to activities and assignments to assessment. And we're going to make the linkage between those things. And then we're going to get into assessment methods. What are various methods of assessment that are used today to, I'm going to say, evaluate learners and also to assess the learning experience? What tools can we use to do that? I believe they continue to evolve, especially in relationship to how learning technologies are used today. Some of the learning technologies today are giving us a lot of analytics about the learner and what they're experiencing and how they're engaging with learning material. And we can learn a lot from that and correlate it to actually success measures, which 10 years ago it would have been very difficult, in some cases nearly impossible to do that. So we have some really unique tools that are enabling us to do that in addition to some of the historically effective assessment and evaluation methods. So we'll talk about those. And I will, at times, from time to time, share with you a course that I recently taught, and you can critique whether some of these elements are in that course or not. I try to put it all in, but I want to make sure that, and I can use that as examples of our work. One example, but it's also open to your feedback and assessment. So that's what we're going to do today. So let's start out with a broad conversation. We have 6 conversations I want to engage in today. The first one has to do with defining a course. What are the necessary components of a course here at Al-Baha University? What are the necessary components of a course at Al-Baha University? Go ahead and take about 10 minutes to talk about this. I'm curious to see what your responses are. Oh, in your discussion groups.
Can you give us examples, please?
I'm certain that you have examples of what a course is because you teach it. What is a course? If you were to tell me, describe to me what a course is, how would you describe that to me? What are the necessary components of a course?
In terms of content, right? Content, not the people, right?
Okay, we are discussing in groups the components of a course, the critical components of a course. There are always variable components of a course. There are things you can add to a course depending on, the context, the major, a lot of factors. But there are some things that should be in every course. And you know that I would say that accrediting bodies when your university is accredited, it is assumed that the university offers accredited courses. You assign credit to the course. Companies can't do that. Companies can offer courses, but they can't offer accredited courses. They can offer training workshops and seminars. But accredited courses are in the purview of accredited universities. And we can trade off these courses. You can transfer a course to another university if it's accredited. But it has to have certain features, certain components in order for it to be an accredited course. So I asked you to help me define this idea of a course and what are the components. And I'm curious to hear what you came up with. What needs to be in a course to say that it is a course? It is. We're going to go over here. I'll tell you what, I want to hear from all the tables, so I'm going to tell you, give me 2 on your list, and we'll go around the room. All right? So give me 2 on your list. Two on your list. Give me 2.
Okay. Courses have an objectives and a defined content.
Objectives, course content. Okay, give me a couple.
Courses, yeah, description and
Specification, that may be more of a culturally contextualized idea. So they might mean, in some cases, perhaps a syllabus. And specification, okay. Or specification. Let's go 2 off of the list here.
I believe the course should cover the required knowledge, number 1. And number 2, it should be relevant to the academic plan. And number 3, it should be relevant to the course and discussion. So basically, those are 3 important parts of what a course should be.
There's prior knowledge or prerequisites. Spelled out what courses are required, prior knowledge is required before taking this course. Is there 2? References. So references in terms of instructional materials that they need to connect to, right? References. Okay. Anything else? Additional readings or additional reading materials. So, okay. Anything? Okay, we'll just go here. Methods of assessment are spelled out. There has to be methods of assessment in a course. That's the difference. That is one difference between an accredited course and a non-accredited course. Accredited courses require some form of assessment of learning. Non-accredited courses do not. You can attend. Attendance may be in okay, satisfactory condition. Okay, hold on 1 second.
Yes, we can say also we have to take care about the title, the major, the program, the teaching plan, the credit hours and contact hours of this course, the way of assessment and evaluation.
That's more too.
Because they have taken a lot of time.
All right, let's. I didn't hear from the women. Is there something you want to add that we haven't talked about yet before I go to the other tables?
Yes, we can add something like when we look at the process, it has to be important for lesson 1, and first is second lesson. First, it has to be introduction to some of the courses, and then we have more deep in the second course.
Okay. You know, an introduction to the course is a really important feature of the course. You know, what's this course all about? What's its purpose? Maybe how it fits into the curriculum. Very important. Yes.
Start with teaching strategy.
Teaching strategies might be in the course specification. It might be something that that is a variable attribute of the course. Something that's value added. In addition to what might constitute a course, we can also add that feature on it, which might be really helpful for learners. To be the best practice. Instructional resources, like the required textbook or other materials that might be required, virtual lab.
And methods.
I'm sorry.
Instructional methods.
Instructional methods.
Prerequisite and co-requisite courses.
So in addition to prerequisites, which we mentioned, co-requisites. Prerequisites and or co-requisites that are required. So let me, we have more.
The study guides and the tutor guide for the course, and the definition of the education requirement for the course. So what are required for that particular course? Small room, or is it big classroom, a lab, skill lab, whatsoever. So education environment was how we communicate the course with the students.
We have a couple things there actually. One is the clarification of the environment, learning environment that's in this course. So it's the length of the course. What about that? You might say that this is a 12-week course, or a 15-week course, or a 6-week course. And the 6-week that meets in this space. Right? So there's an expectation. What about the expectations of the learner? Is that something that you put in your syllabus, in a course? The expectation of the learner. Okay, just checking. Well, let me pull up a course, one that I just recently taught here earlier this year, and I wanted to give you a sense of what we can test our theories out against what I've done. So we have this concept called syllabus. And in the syllabus, we do a couple things. We have a course overview. Pull this up. So I have a course description. In this course, students will do this. They will learn. We talked about this. The introduction to the course. I think I've done that. Well, I've done that in multiple ways, but this is just the basic course description. The prerequisites of the course. These are courses you need to take in advance of taking the course. I'm going to make this bigger so that I can ensure that my colleagues in the other room can see it better. Hopefully that improves the view. Course learning outcomes are there. And I'm going to suggest to you that these course learning outcomes relate to the program learning outcomes, but they're more specific. Okay. So I looked at, when we were doing program outcomes, we looked at what the industry required, we looked at what the discipline required in the field, we looked at a lot of factors. The ministries of education, maybe government has a view on what students should know and be able to do, the mission of the university. Now when we get into course outcomes, I really try to anchor to the program outcomes. So that sort of gives me a good deal of guidance on the kind of courses we need to add and the outcomes of those courses. So in this case, I have course outcomes, information about the faculty member, and if they need to register complaints about the faculty member, how do they do that? This is something that we have as part of our courses, every course. Who contributed to the development of the course? We do a lot of work with teams. Course introduction. And what happens, the expectations for each week of the course are sort of listed here. So, let me go back. So that's one part of it, the syllabus. There's also course materials. I think we talked about that. What are the required materials? Let's click on it and see what that gives us. The required materials for the course, students need to read or access, how they can get the material. Okay, so that's part of the course materials. Student responsibilities. Let's click on this one. So information regarding student responsibilities, how they communicate with each other, and the expectations that we have for them in getting in their assignments, and contacting the professor, the expectation of the faculty in terms of responding back to students. When we talked about the importance of faculty members being accessible, we've tried to set some standards around that and to let students know what those standards are. How much time is going to be expected for them to engage in activity in the course. About 30 hours of learning per credit hour is an expectation or standard we have for these courses. The attendance policy, what we expect of our learners. If we don't communicate these attendance policies, students will be less likely to show up for some of the classes. But if we say, if you miss more than one class, you fail this class, guess what ends up happening? Our students show up to the classes. So we make it a policy, and it's explicit from the very beginning. It's there. And where we've seen challenges or issues in engaging with our learners, we've tried to make the issue very explicit up front and across all courses. So they know that this is an expected behavior of a learner. You have to show up and do your part. You're an active learner. We're showing up to do our part as active teachers. So this is sort of the thing that we've done to assure that. And it differs based on the length of the class. So maybe some classes it's more than 2 sessions or 3, so it depends on the length of the course, but we set some policy around that. And when they need to register for classes, and of course because we have different formats, some of the rules differ based on whether it's face-to-face or a virtual course or some blended course or whatnot. We've had to think through that as a faculty and set standards around those issues and communicate them to students. Because for us, that constitutes the course too. It's the engagement experience between the learner and the faculty. So there. Virus policies, student code of conduct. Because we expect them to be responsible and ethical and engaged participants in our classes, we have a code of conduct for our students that they can refer to. It's not all in the syllabus, but we can link to it. We can link to the documents. You know what you're expected to be able to do in the classroom and what's respectful and what's disrespectful. So we may have different views. And then I said this, there's some variable attributes and some critical ones. If a student is disturbing the class, that would probably go against his code of conduct. If a student is using a mobile device, well, that would depend. Because maybe in the class, I ask all the students to pull out a mobile device and do a treasure hunt for me of information related to a subject. I might have them use the technology in the classroom, right? And embrace the use of technology. However, if what they're doing is disruptive to the class, that will be a problem. So we have to sort of set one's, so there's a difference there. Let's go back for a moment, see what else constitutes a course in our view. Student responsibility, academic policies. So we've outlined and required in every course that there are certain academic policies. And they're around academic assessment, academic integrity, and process for students expressing their concerns. We've had, we offer programs in many parts of the world now. And we have had cases where we've introduced new programs where the culture around use of prior information by other authors was totally acceptable. But because we're offering an American degree, we have to follow the American rules for such matters. So we've had to reconsider how we communicate about our approaches to academic integrity and plagiarism. So we introduced, for example, a program in Nepal, and the students, we want to encourage collaboration among students. But if the papers all come in and they look just the same, we have a problem. So we initially had a lot of reports of plagiarism when we launched our program in Nepal. But then when we clarified what we mean by it and put it in our course, incidents of plagiarism dropped considerably. And it required an orientation, and it required information in our course about our policy and explaining why we have an American standard for this and how we're expecting students to do independent work. And what happens if you violate the policy is expressed in every course. You know, it's first incident, what happens, second incident, and the appeal process that's available to you. So you know it's not about me not liking you as a student. We have a policy that we administer consistently across every course for every student. This is it, this is what it is. I don't have anything against you, but what you've done illustrates plagiarism. Now we have technology that supports this. I don't know if you all use Turnitin.com. But for most major projects or papers that students have to write, they have to submit it to Turnitin.com. The student and the faculty member gets a report, sort of an overlap report, that shows that this paper was 100% copied from somewhere on the web page, or it was 5%, and you have to talk about what would be a concern for you. But there's a technology that enables us to do this, and again, increasing the objectivity of this process. Not that I have anything against you, it's your paper overlaps with this one. And that's not acceptable. So, but from a course standpoint, it's having clear policies around this and communicating that to students in an objective way. The same is true with assessment and grading policies, graduate grading policy. Grading guidelines, assessments for both assignments and activities, and submission and return policies, and grade reports. This was interesting. So we had the case where most students who took classes, this particular grading grid was a result of assessment activities. We learned from the narrative responses on course surveys that most students expected that if they did what was prescribed in the course, they would receive top grades. Everybody wanted an A. And so what we expressed as our faculty got together and discussed this in committee, and they decided if students do everything that's expected in a course, really they're likely to get a B. And if they go above and beyond what we've expected in the class, they can qualify for an A grade. So we could put up a grid that indicated expected performance and one that indicated maximum performance or points for a particular assignment. And that changed the expectation of the learner about what they should be receiving as grades in the course. Just sort of was in response to what we learned from that. And then, of course, expression of what the grade levels mean. And in graduate grading, we give minuses and pluses. In undergraduate grading, we only go A, B, C, D, and then, of course, F. And then what that means. A means superior performance. And then for this particular, here's another thing we learned. That because we are a theory to practice institution, our grading grid has to reflect both theoretical knowledge or academic knowledge as well as practical knowledge or practical evaluation, the application of that knowledge. So then we broke our grade grid out into two grids, one dealing with typical factors associated with academic performance, and then one dealing with typical factors related to application of knowledge. Business, in this case, it has to do with business. So, would the professor be honored to recommend you to do this type of work for a high-quality organization? You know, that's, you know, constitutes superior work, for example. And on the academic side, it's about the expression of ideas, the maturity of thought, you know, the mechanics of your writing, so those sort of issues were in the academic component of this. So these are some of the things that, you know, grading policy was something that we required in every course. And then one variable attribute is, you know, if there are student support services for a course, you know, additional enrichment experiences, tutoring, or other kinds of materials you can read that might help you learn the material in our class, that was in there. Now let me stop for a moment and ask you, based on what we talked about, does this constitute a course? Is there anything missing? Reactions? Yes, sir.
So I think also an important part that should be included in the syllabus is something related to the mission of the whole school or the department. For example, if one part of the mission is to provide a distinguished product in education through using technology. For example, let's assume that this is stated in the mission. Then here, the faculty member, when designing and working on the syllabus, should reflect this in his syllabus. How, in his course, he is going to use technology. Then he would say something like students should bring their laptops, we will have access to Blackboard, to smartboard, something like this. So things related to the mission should also be included in the syllabus. Dealing with disabled people, for example. The university part of its mission to support the people with disabilities. This should be included in the syllabus. Like disabled people, okay, are assigned certain seats or certain places in the room, etc., something like this. So the syllabus should reflect what the mission of the school is. Thank you.
You know, I like that idea. I've not seen many syllabi with the mission in it, but I can see how that can be an enrichment to a course. I mean, maybe it's a mission of the college, might be somewhere in the syllabus or in the course material. I like that idea.
I have a separate one.
It's great.
I think when we say a course component, so there are two different types. I can say the course component actually defined in the curriculum, and the course component defined by the course instructor, right? So when we say the course defined by the course instructor, it means I am now defining my policy, my grading, and lesson plan, those type of things, right? Those are not available in the syllabus itself, right? So this is how I have done some. One page over here.
Yeah. Yes. You can create a new tab at the top.
Oh,
Yeah, right there.
so if we go in here, that could be you.
Describe.
Okay, this is my course page at the page where you see I have this contact information and my profile for my current students and my
Which I think is really a best practice, to have your profile or your bio information available to learners. It's a great thing.
So this is actually, I had my own lucky.com, but then I actually moved it over here. And then I will go to courses, what I got before, what I'm doing now.
You may have to speak into the microphone so that.
Okay. So here's the course component, which is how I define, right? This is the last semester, which the contact information, my label stern, my email, the course objectives, required textbooks, essential references, grading, late work policy, policy on attendance, how you can do well in this course, right? This is how you expect the different grade. Academic honesty, classroom policies and guidelines, communication, and my lesson plan, if there are material, we can download from here also. And yeah. So, and other videos like I have over here and my message over here. So this is just another way. So I was saying these components that are come from the curriculum, right? So these are defined by the instructor, by myself. So, and I would given the link to download the different materials.
So I would say that you've done a similar design, except that I've had groups of faculty who have decided that the conditions for success in a course, for example, are pretty consistent across all courses. So they agree on what these conditions are and spelled out more specifically, here's what you need to do to be successful in this class. And generally that crosses all courses. Now there may be some course-specific success factors that you can add to a course, and you can communicate with students, and that's fine. But attend lectures, take notes, attend all lectures, attend some lectures, attend, so what we've spelled out is exactly, you miss X number, you don't get a grade in this course.
Yeah, all this attendance you see on the top.
Yeah. Complete all assignments on time. Yeah. So there's, I would agree with you that there are some variable attributes, things that you can bring in as a faculty member that are specific to your course section. But then there are probably also things we learn from assessment that are generally good practice for students to be successful in any course. In those cases, we decided to put forth policy that I can then cut and paste from one class to the next, because that's consistent. In fact, what we've done is we created course boilerplates for courses and for things like syllabus. Every syllabus in every course contains these minimum components. You can always drag and drop one in for yourself and add your own set of requirements for that particular course. But it has standard expectations for every course for a syllabus. So now, I don't know if there are any other comments or thoughts about this, but we have to know what a course is in order for us to decide if we have quality in the course. We need to determine what are the critical features of the course, and we've done that. The next component of a course is defined by its learning outcomes, right? What should students know and be able to do in this experience with us together? And so we have to specify these learning outcomes. Let me pull this up on the screen. Where are we? Before I get into learning outcomes, let me say that there are tools that help us with the design of a course once we sort of know what our rules for the course is. I'm, for some reason, getting a funky block that's sort of, you have this in your material, this graph. And what it is what's called the ADDIE model. It's a cycle for the development of curriculum that can be quite useful for you, and I think is quite useful when you communicate with accrediting bodies, that you have a method for how you go about the development of courses. So we know what a course is, what constitutes a course, what are the features of a course that give its form. Now, how do we arrive at the materials, the content, the learning activities? Well, we would employ an ADDIE model as one way of doing that. So we analyze the program outcomes, for example, to determine what kind of courses we need and what sort of course outcomes that are required. The analysis. And then we design a course experience based on those outcomes. And we're going to get a little bit of practice today with this, just to kind of walk through this to see the linkage. So I might design activities for the learners and sequence them and chunk the content in a way that it can be achieved within the time frame expected. So for our learners, for example, as you saw in my syllabus, it said that for every credit hour, there's an expectation that students are engaged in about 30 hours of learning time. So if we have a 3 credit hour course, somewhere between 90 and up to 120 hours might be required of that student, somewhere between 30 and 40 hours of learning time. So that might translate into anywhere between 15 and 20 hours a week if students are studying, are engaged in class, or studying in some way, maybe more. Do math well. But there's some math involved in that determination of how much time. And I can assign, I can create and chunk content and experiences for the learners for the duration of that week that reflects the amount of learning time we expect of them each week. Now, I'm contrasting this is an approach that we've taken. It has quoted quite well with the accrediting bodies because it says to them that regardless of the length of the course, I've committed to so much learning time per credit hour. So if the class is 15 weeks, there may be fewer learning hours per week involved in the course. But if the course is an accelerated course, it's 6 weeks, there's going to be more of a commitment per week, per student in that course. Because the credit hour is the anchor for how much time I'm expecting them to be engaged in learning. That is the standard for American higher education institutions. How much time are you expecting the learners to be involved in learning? Regardless of the modality. It could be online, face-to-face, some hybrid format. It could be 12 week, 6 week, 15 week. But per credit hour, how much time are you expecting them to learn? So that gives us a design parameter. It really does. It tells me that this week I can only give them so much time to work on projects. The learning outcomes gives me a design parameter, because then I can decide what kinds of learning activities and events are related to the learning outcomes. And then what kind of content is required for them to know the ideas, the concepts in order for them to do these learning activities. It all sort of fits together. So it starts with analysis, it goes to design, then there's the actual development. It's taking into consideration all of the tools and the people and the learning materials and content you have available to you and putting it together in some organized way so that learners learn. Content has certain affordances for learners. They can read it, they can remember it, they engage with the content. The technology has certain affordances for the learners. It might enable them to connect with each other and to connect with you and to experience simulations. The people have certain affordances. As a professor, I can instruct, I can coach, I can give feedback. The learners in the classroom provide affordances to the other learners. They can be discussion, peer reviewers, and give feedback to each other. And so you have to think about all the aspects of the interactions in this course, that if you put them together in a certain way, can help the students learn. That's what development's all about. So you have to design the experience, the development of it, and then the implementation, which is I. It's actually the course, teaching it, how it runs, the management of your classroom, all of that stuff. And then evaluation. How do we ultimately, which gives us the basis for an accredited course, is that we evaluate the performance of learners. So we have to have that element present. Oh, this is a model. I'm sure there are others. but I wanted to suggest to you that being able to express an approach to curriculum and instruction provides a high level of potency when you talk about visiting teams crediting your programs. To show this is how we go about developing our programs, this is how we develop our courses in relationship to our programs, this is the model we employ to do that. Does this make sense? Any questions, comments, or reactions? You know, I've done these seminars for people in many parts of the world now for some years now. And I stay in contact with a number of the folks who were participants in these seminars. And many of them have gone on to become deans and department chairs. And I even have a couple that have gone on to become vice presidents. And they tell me, in large part, that it's having a deep understanding of the academic enterprise that has helped them in sort of their own progression. And that's sort of what we're doing. We're deep diving here. We've been talking about, you know, overall academic quality and institutional views on that, and accrediting body views on what's expected of learners. And we're moving from programs to courses. And now we're going to deep dive into course outcomes and activities and assessment. That's what we're going to do today. And then we're going to deep dive into teaching and learning tomorrow. You know, because there's the question of what really supports student learning. Teaching is only a part of it. So we're going to talk about this relationship of teaching and learning and focus on the learner tomorrow. And then we're going to when we deal with the final day, this is the middle part, but the middle part anchors the rest of it. It sort of relies on the first couple days, but it's really informing what we're going to do for the rest of the week. At the end of this, we got to talk about program review. How do we reevaluate programs and determine whether they remain viable, right? What's the conditions and criteria for that activity? So we're right in the middle right now. Just want to situate us in our conversation. Yes.
هل تنصح أن يضم النموذج يعني نموذج التوصيف نموذج من أسئلة الامتحان، نموذج عن أسئلة الاختبار الإكزام؟
My translator gave me a partial. Okay, do I recommend providing examples of the test questions in the course? You know, this is a decision that you have to make as a faculty member. You know, to what extent you provide sample test items, you know, for individuals. So I have different views on this. So in foundational courses, this is just my opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of any sort of accrediting body when I say this, but we learned that if we could have students in a course where the success rates were pretty low. We had a statistics course for students who largely were coming back from industry into the classroom, and many of them hadn't taken a math class in 20 years. So our challenge was, because statistics is a prerequisite for most of our Bachelor of Science programs, you have to have statistics. So what we decided to do was create some self-paced instructional modules in the course that had practice questions so that they could assess whether they were understanding the concept and the ideas as they were going through this tool, right? And so what we learned was that if we provided the self-paced instruction, in addition to what they were learning in our classroom, but the self-paced instruction included self-test items, that it increased their success ultimately in knowing the material and on passing the exams that they needed to take and completing the example problems. It really helped them. So for that sort of basic foundational course, it was a necessary strategy for us to employ to give them these practice items as part of instruction. Right? Now, in upper division courses, we're probably less likely to do that. We expect the learner to have mastered the foundational items, and we're probably less likely to do that.
Thank you. In your example, you spent too much to count only 1 credit hour for safe teaching hours. So,
Learning.
learning, yes, learning hours. So, can you elaborate more on this? And I will be grateful if you tell us standards for calculation credit hours.
So, what's the difference between teaching hours and learning hours? Anybody have any ideas or thoughts about this?
Yes.
Think about this being learner-centered experience. It's learner-centered. You're thinking about how much time would you reasonably expect a learner to be involved in learning activities. Learning activities will include the time they have in the classroom with you teaching them. But it also includes the time we expected them to study the material, the time we expect them to work on projects and teams or other assignments, to write papers. That's also, in our view, learning time. In fact, I have a few professors that also require that students reflect on theory or practice and write reflection papers. That's part of the learning time in their mind. And most experiential learning models have some form of reflection as part of
For assignment, the reflection.
Yeah.
Control.
reflection on the learning experience, reflection on the field experience, reflection on what they've done in the laboratory, to be able to write, this is what I did, this is what what I take away from it. If I had a chance to do it again, this is how I would do it differently. Sort of thinking, reflecting, active reflection on experience.
So the standard method of calculation credit hours, you can elaborate more on the standard method of calculating credit hours.
So there are so many accrediting bodies in the U.S. express and authorizing bodies, like the states, have some prescriptions for that. And what I would suggest to you is to get familiar with if there are any prescriptions by credit hour for the accrediting bodies that you're submitting for. Because program accrediting bodies may have more rigorous requirements for that. So I wouldn't tell you that there is a standard for it. My sense is that some minimum standard of 30 hours of learning time per credit hour is something that I've found out there, sort of a minimum expectation. But I've seen an expectation as high as 45 learning hours per credit hour in some fields. So, just get familiar with what the accrediting bodies are and what their standards are for that. And then, of course, per credit hour, divided by the weeks or the number of class sessions you have, plus the learning time that you expect of the students, in addition to your lectures. And that would be the learning time.
You showed a slide about the marks for the expected performance of the student and for outstanding performance. Do you provide students with examples of how this expected performance looks like in assignment? Or that's just you do for yourself? That's expected or not?
I think that, that could be a best practice. I don't know if it's required, and I wouldn't say that all the professors do that. The one time we use papers is when we have, and we use, here are some examples of the exceptional papers, is we promote that on our, we can share that with people on the website. If students are willing to allow us to do that. So we have to first seek permission from the student. Would you be willing for us to share your exceptional work? We share exceptional work from time to time. But we don't show, here's poor performance and what it looks like. We haven't done that. Now, if we have a group of faculty members who are involved in assessing program outcomes, we will use papers, a good paper, an average paper, and a poor paper, to calibrate our ratings as a group. So we will all review the same papers, a good one, a medium one, and a poor one, so that we know what proficiency and mastery looks like, what somewhat proficient looks like, and what not proficient looks like. And that enables us to evaluate other papers, so we use it for that purpose. But for the sake of sharing with learners, maybe it's a good practice. We have had faculty members share the best papers, say, it can be done. It can be done by students like you. It's going to require work. But here's what sort of good papers have looked like in the past, or good projects. That makes sense. We wouldn't do that for things where the result would be quite comparable. If, for example, it's an assignment where they have a lot of choice, like pick your work setting, pick your problem, you have to analyze that problem, you have to consider the environmental factors that contribute to that problem, you have to come up with a solution that addresses that problem. That's a variable kind of assignment. Showing best case examples of that is not that bad. You're saying for other kinds of problems this has been tackled in this way. But if it's something where everybody's going to be doing the very same similar work, I wouldn't put it out there. I wouldn't share it. I don't do that. Okay, so we have this ADDIE model that helps us with this process. We've had some conversations about it. Are there any other questions about this model as an approach? An approach to illustrate how we engage in curriculum development. I think it applies across all fields. I think it's sort of agnostic to discipline, and it can be quite useful as you think about putting together courses in the curriculum. Let me make sure I'm respectful of our time. We're at 10:02. So this is what I'm going to do before our first break. I'm going to cover the Bloom's taxonomy, and we can begin to look at one or more outcomes that are not well written. Bloom's taxonomy provides us with a tool to enable us. Our microphone went out. My apologies, the microphone went out. I changed the batteries, and we're back broadcasting again. So what I was about to talk about is Bloom's taxonomy. It provides us with, and you should have this in your packet because it's being blocked a bit. We'll see how if we can fix this on our screen. But provides us with a tool that enables us to write outcomes at different levels of performance for learners. Starting with the more simple and moving up to the more complex. And so this has been around for some time. I don't exactly know the history of this taxonomy, but we use it all the time to clarify the expectations of our learners. Before we were using this tool, I can tell you that the level of abstraction that faculty were using in writing their outcomes was at a very high and confusing level. Made it very difficult for us to measure the outcomes. So for example, we used the term understand a lot before, that students will understand how to do something, or that students will learn how to do something. And we didn't exactly know what the faculty member meant, so it was very hard to determine whether the activities or assignments actually enabled learners to achieve that goal, and it made it very difficult for us to assess it properly. So understanding, if you can see, has a category within Bloom's taxonomy. And that if we wanted to know if students arrive at understanding, do we mean that they're able to discuss it, that they can infer about it, that they're capable of explaining the idea or the concept? What do we mean when we say understand? That they're capable of interpreting an equation, or explaining an idea to someone, or summarizing ideas that have been presented to them. What are we seeking when we say we want them to understand? So Bloom's taxonomy provides us with a greater level of clarity. When I say I want someone to learn something, well, I think anything in here could satisfy learning, right? Anything in the whole taxonomy. You know, their critical examination, their ability to make judgments or test something is evidence of learning. So when we say learn, what are we talking about? At what level do we want them to learn? Do we want them to learn in terms of remembering, defining, or applying concepts? So Bloom gives us a lot more potency in our description of what we're expecting learners to know and be able to do. And when we do that, it gives us a lot more guidance in the kinds of activities and assignments than we provide to the learners. So I have a couple examples for you of, we can work through one of these now. I think that would be great. So here's an outcome that I created the other day working with. I saw that we all had bottled water, and we have these business students who are our students. And so the outcome is students will understand how to use social media to promote bottled water. Students will understand how to use social media to promote bottled water. Pretty vague general outcome. What I need your help in doing is creating a more specific outcome based on Bloom's taxonomy. It can be in the understand category, it can be in the apply. You might raise the level of learning here, from understanding to applying to creating, but essentially, what could I mean if I were better at this as it relates to students understanding how to use social media to promote bottled water? Can you rewrite that for me in ways that are measurable and specific, attainable, and realistic? Rewrite the outcome. Understanding is not measurable, so I'm asking you to rewrite it in measurable terms using Bloom's taxonomy.
Can you say the statement again?
The statement is that students will understand how to use social media to promote bottled water. Rewrite that outcome for me. One more time.
For more time working.
Students will understand how to use social media to promote bottled water. These are business students, they're trying to promote bottled water. Students will understand how to use social media to promote bottled water.
Every slide, this white space.
That's not a, I don't think that's a PowerPoint, I think that's a PDF.
Based on what would you like to have right?
Pardon?
Based on
Bloom's taxonomy is a tool that helps us provide greater clarity.
if we understanding and rewrite
Yes, it will. The right one.
Take about a minute to wrap up, then I'm going to go around the rooms and ask what you came up with an alternative to this very vague learning outcome. Okay, let's go back together on this one. This will be our last activity before the break. So we had a challenge. I expressed a learning outcome to you that I know now is sufficiently vague. It's students will understand how to use social media to promote bottled water. And I have to tell you, this is a tough one to measure consistently across sections because you can interpret it variously by faculty members. And sometimes we don't do ourselves justice. We confuse our learners. We don't know, we communicate these vague ways that make it difficult for them to really focus on what we expect from them. Because we haven't clarified exactly what we expect from the learner when we say things like understand. Is it more of an emphasis on discussing and knowing, or is it more an emphasis on they're promoting this product to the broadest population possible? What are we really wanting for them to do here? Are we limiting them to social media? Do we want them to use certain tools in social media? Should we be narrowing it down to types of social media and prescribing that to them? If we're asking them to make a choice, are we asking them to justify the choice they've made based on its ability to reach the broadest population of people who would likely drink this water? What do we want from them? So, I'm kind of curious to know what you came up with. And I'm going to ask the women first if you have suggestions for us on how we might rewrite this learning outcome. Okay, we're going to go to this room then, and we come back. So, gentlemen, anyone want to start us off by sharing what you came up with? Okay.
Yeah, this is obviously a very vague statement. So first of all, what problem I see in this statement, I say it this way. So why we are emphasizing on just a bottle of water, right? Just bottle of water. Why? So all will understand, right? So I have changed the statement into 3 different statements, right? Okay. So first statement can be: students will learn. Instead of I say understand, students will learn how to use social media to promote sales, right? Number 2 statement can be, in order to make the same statement meaningful, I don't know what is on the top learning outcome and what is the next in the bottom learning outcome, but just looking at this one.
Let me
So,
ask, before you go on, let me ask you this. Let me ask the group. So we replaced students who will understand how to use social media to promote bottled water. Can you repeat that first one again?
I said students will learn instead of understand, right?
Okay, let me stop you there for a second. Any reactions to that? You replaced one immeasurable term that's vague with even a higher level of abstraction. Because anything in that box, anything in the whole screen there, would constitute learning. So what do you really want them to be able to do? Or don't be able to do is the question. So learn is another vague, broad abstraction. Agreed?
Yes, we
Yes.
agree.
All right. So let's hear your other statement.
Okay. Learn is in all of my statement. So
Okay, well, we're going to give you that microphone then. Let's go to another one. Let's hear some other examples. Yeah, let's go here.
Well, difficult on top. Face problems at this time. In place where students will be able to explain the advantages of the water using social media like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Okay, so they will be able to explain the advantages of the bottled water. Using. So there, I'll come right to you. Hold on one second. Let me repeat what this gentleman just said. Students will explain the advantages of bottled water through using Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Okay? That gets a little closer to understanding, right, what they're expected to do. Explain the benefits using these tools. That's sort of one option here. I heard a comment from the other room. Let's go there. Yes. Please go ahead with your comment. Can you hear us in the other room?
Comment, please.
Yes, please.
Okay. يقتصاد إشارة بكثير تكون خير التواصل الاجتماعي لترويج الخدمات أو أن يستخدم نماذج
Can you please repeat?
أن يأتي الطالب أمثلة لكيفية استخدام الدماغ أو أن يستخدم الطالب وسائل لكيفية استخدام وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي لترويج الخدمات.
Yes, three examples. How to use social media.
Okay.
And create. She used to wear social design to design using social media. Yes, to design videos how to use social media for what purpose.
Okay, so one approach might be to design an approach or to using social media to promote bottled water. Okay. Using design theory or design thinking. So that would bring in a different model. So they would say that there's a model of design or design thinking, design theory that can be employed to incorporate social media approaches to promote bottled water. That would be a higher order outcome here, because you're now creating an approach to this, right? So you've moved beyond understanding to creating, which is good. But and if you have that expectation of your learners, this is a better way of expressing it. Okay? I'm sure there's some other ways that this has been expressed, so let's hear from someone else.
We break it down to all the Bloom's taxonomy. For example, for remembering, we said students should be able to list and available social media to use, to explain the methods he will use to promote the positive water. So this is understanding. And then apply the method he chooses to his promotion policy. Then at the end, he should evaluate the challenges he may face doing this.
You just did us a Bloom's taxonomy walk around, right? We just walked up the hierarchy a bit, like we climbed the ladder. We started from simple outcome to the more complex, right? And sort of metacognitive, evaluate your approach, your own approach to this, right? How did it work or not? So there's an interesting way to look at how we might use different levels of Bloom's taxonomy to come to a wonderful set of learning outcomes and kinds of experiences that would be informed by them for this particular activity. That far extends beyond my vague notion of students will understand how to use it. In fact, I would have been better off just saying students will use social media to promote bottled water. At least I know what I'm having them do. I'm having them use it. And that use is a demonstration that they know how to apply concepts, that they understand the ideas. Questions or comments about this activity? And the use of Bloom's taxonomy as a tool. Yes?
So why students will only use social media for the bottle of water? Why just course outcome is to just learn social media to just one bottle of water?
I didn't say bottled water. Never said bottled water. I said
Bottled water.
Yeah, bottle of water.
Yeah, so this company, you're selling this company's product.
Company, maybe, or anything.
Yeah, we could have replaced it with something else. We used bottled water as an example. It could have been, use social media to sell suits. So yeah, but the point of this activity really is how might we employ this tool to sharpen our learning outcomes so that they are specific, measurable, attainable, and realistic. We have SMART outcomes. S-M-A-R-T. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and can be done within the time of the course. SMART outcomes. If there aren't any other comments or questions, I'll stick around for the break. But let's take a break. Let's take 10, 15 minutes. 15 minutes? 15 minutes. very specific. Very specific. I know what they're doing. This one, have learned good programming style in C++. What do you really want them to do? This one is confusing. It's too vague. Implement algorithms.
To me, these are like high level, right?
Yeah.
So that's the low level. If they want to go to the low level, they need to go to the actually define the things, right?
High level are up here.
Yeah, that's not according to Hume's taxonomy.
So learning is, all of it is learning. Learning is both low level and high level. Learning is both low level and high level. I can learn by describing something, I can learn by memorizing something. That's a low level. But I can also learn by categorizing, predicting something. So the issue is, at what level really do you want them to perform? Is this one?
Yeah, to me, like you see, when you say learning outcome, that means to learn, they are learning people, right? So when I say to students to learn, social media, what? So the learn word itself.
So you know I said bottle water, not a bottle.
Oh, bottle.
Bottle.
That's bottle. Water. Right. But yeah, so that's what I'm saying. But my point is the learn, right? Word the learn, right?
It would be considered too vague. This is the non-example given by crediting bodies. This is the non-example. So they will say, we don't want this, we want this. I'm just.
Yeah, I will definitely change
So if you want at a high level programming style, which is a high level concept, but it's hidden behind a learner. So what is it about do you want them to develop a particular style?
Basically, it's structured programming, right? And you go to structured programming, object-oriented programming, clear programming, right? Now structure and other things type of programming, right? Although it is programming, but not the real programming, right?
Right.
So that's why go back to my. So I don't know where this will fit over here. But you are right, because you see, when I am writing this thing, I am just writing it on top of my head, right? I am not following any the model, right? So if I follow the model, then I come up with the
So
model.
if you said good programming style, there's actually multiple outcomes that it included. I'm sorry. It included the creation ability of the programmers, but there maybe some logical component to this. And so do you have them critique the programming styles of others? How do they know they have a style? A style is relative to other styles, you know? So is it a critique, or and if it's actual programming, is it producing programs? Is it designing software? There may be a few ways you might break this one down. This actually might be 2 or 3 learning outcomes at a high level. Just something to think about.
I got to follow some model instead of saying something. I got to follow the model.
It will help you, and it will help clarify for yourself what you want the students to do through the course, and it will help the learners know what you fundamentally expect of them.
Yeah. And I just figured it out one mistake over here also. Go back to my other. You see, be able to, but have learned good programming. But it should be able to learn good programming. Right? So that should also be
Be able to, if you wanted to, you can say, students, upon successful completion of this course, the students will be able to, and then what would you have them do? Design algorithms.
Learn good programming.
That won't work.
That won't work.
Implement algorithms in C++. implement algorithms in C++. Yeah, is that, maybe that's the framework.
Yeah.
Are you implementing algorithms in C++ to do something else, to achieve some broader perspective?
Yeah, now you see we are learning new things over here, right? And then we will go and implement those and fix the things which are not correct regarding the right?
Because that will give you a sense of what level of the course this is, if you clarify that more. Because it may be in a more advanced, you might have an advanced algorithms and data structure courses, course that has even higher order outcomes. So at what level is this course taught? And how is that reflected in the outcome? It's something that stood out right away when I saw it, but I didn't want to comment on it. I said, I'll talk to you afterwards about it.
No, but these are the examples. When we talk about the concept, and you see, and we have an example in front, then that makes sense, right?
It does.
So that,
If you're open to that,
Right.
I'm open to it too.
right. So
Be responsible about it. But I do
Yeah.
like, this gives us, this is why we're having this conversation. It's about advancement. How can we make it better? Thank
So
you.
there's a continuous improvement.
That's exactly right. That's the point. That's the point.
So maybe the next is
Thank you. Dean is out there bringing you in, huh? Bringing you back.
Yeah, for me to sell, I start to talk shop.
We're going to get started in about a minute here. We have the participants walking slowly back into the room. As soon as they arrive, we will get started. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're on day 3, and we are talking about learning outcomes at the course level. And we're spending time on this today because this is at the center of our work. Program outcomes and the course outcomes are really central to our work. And if not for anything else, this is where we spend a good deal of our time, developing courses and teaching courses. Right? This is where we spend a good proportion of our time. And we want to make sure that the kind of learning activities that we design are highly engaging and relevant to what we're expecting our learners to be able to know and do. And so we're going to talk about how we develop well-defined learning activities and experiences. And then we've got to be able to come up with an evaluation method that connects with the learning outcome and the learning activities and assignments that we prescribe to students. Vague learning outcomes give us very little direction on the kind of assessment activities that we would determine. They just don't give us direction. Clarified outcomes provide us with a lot of direction in terms of not just the activities and assignments, but how we would measure whether students have demonstrated mastery related to that learning outcome. So I have one other example that I've asked, with the permission of Dr. here, to share with us for the sake of learning. Because I think this is also another piece that's really important to talk about. It's if you're committed to assessment, a culture of assessment, it's really about improvement. It's not about penalizing people. When you're in assessment mode, you're continuously looking at what we do to see how can we make it better, right? Because in the end, it'll benefit the learners, it'll benefit the institution. And my belief is, if we have that sort of clarity, it's going to benefit society. So with the doctor's permission, when I was going through his course syllabus, or specification, is that what we call it? I noticed something right away, just jumped right out at me. I didn't make a comment about it, but I saved it to the break to discuss it with him. And that is his learning outcomes. A few of them are very broad and would be very difficult for me to measure if I were intending to assist with assessment. So he has the course is designed to introduce fundamentals of data structures and algorithms for computer engineering majors. It introduces the variety of topics listed there. The algorithms include searches, sorting, graph searches, and tree traversals. And upon successful completion of the course, the students will Yes, be able to design algorithms to solve problems using data structures such as arrays, lists, stacks, queues. That first outcome, is that pretty clear to you? Thoughts, reactions? Just for the sake of conversation? Is it not clear? Go ahead. Let's hear your comments. Yes. It's clear. It's clear. Okay. I disagree with that. And that seems pretty clear to me. You want them to be able to design algorithms. That's pretty high level too. You've got to design these algorithms. And in the context of solving problems. So that gives me some clarity. We're solving problems, we're designing algorithms to solve problems, and using data structures such as these things. And that's pretty clear. You're giving me context. I know we're talking about computer science major here. We're not talking about pharmacy or fisheries. That's pretty clear too. So I know what domain I'm in, and I know clarity on the level of complexity that I need to work with, and sort of data structures I need to work with. Second one, have learned good programming style in C++. Is that clear? Can you measure it? No. Very not measurable. That one probably needs to be reworded. And we've talked about this. So learning could be anything in Bloom's taxonomy, really. At what level are we talking about learning? All of this represents learning in some way, depending on the context of the outcome that you describe. So, he may decide that this is a higher level, since he's expressed one pretty high level outcome in terms of design. There may be something else at a very high level here that he's expecting them to do that maybe even builds on the design outcome. It's possible. So it may be something more in the area of evaluating or analyzing. Or it might be something...
Apply, maybe.
Pardon me?
Apply.
Apply. So that would provide some additional clarity to this learning outcome. Be able to implement algorithms. This one doesn't have the context the first one has. Implement in what way? Implement, for what purpose? You could perhaps add some depth here, and that would add clarity. But you have a good start. We're talking about implementation. And if we have a structure in that way, we probably would want to take our be able to and move it up into the first sentence. Upon successful completion of this course, the students will be able to design algorithms, implement algorithms, and we might have a sort of an agreement structure to the outcomes that provides some consistency too. But thank you for allowing us to use this example, and this is not uncommon. This is absolutely not uncommon. I see this all the time. And there is an opportunity for adding depth and clarity because it does inform the kind of activities you would design for your learners. The harder work in this model is not specifying your outcome. It's easy to write down, learn, and understand pretty quickly. That's easy. The harder part here is to then figure out what you really want them to do after you say that. The harder part in what I've expressed to you is coming up with a clear learning outcome to begin with, because then everything else sort of flows naturally from it. Okay? There's a sort of a natural flow from clear outcome to activity to assessment. Yes, comment.
Thank you so much. I want to just add something that's really important in my opinion about the goals, because there are differences, I think, in my opinion, between goals and objectives. For example, if I want my student to be able to enumerate the bacteria, for example, this is the main goal, and then the objectives will be you should be able to enumerate the bacteria using, for example, microscope. something like that. Is it possible to add this to the course description, for example, to make it more clear?
Yes, you could say, you could express in your course description, he has here course objectives, sort of broader purposes of this course, right, are expressed in one way. And then you have the course outcomes. And then what you're describing, I might call the assignment outcomes, right? At the assignment level, I may have outcomes that flow from my course outcomes that provide deeper clarity and specificity. And that might be what you might call a sub-objective. We're saying they're all learning outcomes, but they're just expressed at different levels. And so I would just express an activity-related outcome.
And what about the Bloom's taxonomy? Should you fulfill, for example, all the goals not related to understanding, remembering, creating, analyzing, according to the age? Is it possible to apply this, for example, to primary school students and then secondary school, for example, and higher education, according to their age and their mind?
Someone wanted to respond to that question.
I have one comment for this question. I think for basic courses, we use room taxonomy, remembering, not more than understanding. And the applied courses in higher level, we use analyzing, applying, evaluating. I think it's different from according to the course nature. Basic course or applied course.
These outcomes are expressed within a disciplinary context. I want to make sure we're clear on that. So, his outcome of designing algorithms, the verb design is on Bloom's taxonomy. But it is in the context of a very sophisticated and complex field, discipline, which gets reflected in he's designing these algorithms to solve problems using data structures such as arrays, list stacks. Am I making sense? Okay. I could use the verb design for a group of third graders who are working with Legos to design a spaceship using Legos. It's high order. I may need to have them learn how to use the tools by going to lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy and describing prerequisite knowledge for them to use it. But the ultimate aim for them may be to design a tower using Legos. So age group may not necessarily correspond with this. But his answer is absolutely correct. In a curriculum of study within the context of a complex field, you may start with lower level outcomes and build up to them in a progressive way. That shows an intentionality to your curriculum. That is a desired state. It doesn't necessarily correspond with verbs and ages. You see, there's a bit of a difference because it's verbs in context, right? You remember one thing I said to you is one problem I have is you can master some of these verbs, but if you don't put the context to it. I have done this. I put my hand over the description of the program and read it and said, I don't even know what program this is. The context is important. So in your field, you can start at lower level. You need to make sure they know the concepts and ideas, list, memorize, recite, describe, explain, and build up to analyze and evaluate within a context of a complex field, profession. That makes sense or not?
Why I asked you this question because I have experience about education in the past. I went to primary school, secondary school as well. Before I came here, and at that time, when I was trying to put my goals, I put all different methods. Okay, building up from remembering and analyzing, but according to the time, the age of the student. So, for example, if I went to the primary school, simple example, if I want a student to order some papers according to something like that, to evaluating and analyzing according to his age, he will be able to do that. That's what I mean.
It quite could be that, if you looked at the learning outcomes for K through third grade, that you'll see the great majority of them are at the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy. You will likely see that. And it could be that my concept of designing a tower really is assembling it, which is at a lower level. So there's some things in there that we can, I can see, I would say there's some relationship between the level of maturity, let's put it that way, relative to the context that the learner is in Bloom's taxonomy and the requirements of the learner for lower level skill sets. I would agree. So I'm in agreement with both of you gentlemen, right? But for our purposes, what you're saying makes a tremendous amount of sense, and that sort of intentionality within the field of our discipline to show that moving up the taxonomy makes a lot of sense, which is an example that was sort of given to us with our bottled water at this table. And we said, these are sort of the prerequisite knowledge, and we came up with 4 outcomes. Is that right? So that was a very useful illustration of that point. Is there one other comment, or okay, one last comment, and we'll move on.
I think there is 2 important things when considering the outcomes of the course. The first one is the course itself. It is introductory or advanced course. For introductory course, we need 2 levels of non-taxonomy. But the advanced course, we need high level of non-taxonomy. Another thing is the mission of the program to be considered when designing the outcome for each course.
Thank you for that. So let me ask you, do you feel comfortable with writing learning outcomes if you had a tool like Bloom's taxonomy, of sort of clarifying, sharpening your outcomes? Do you feel comfortable doing that now? Yes? Well, I've got a special challenge for you. You can tell you why. Because I've learned that scholars like you and me, we have been trained on the solid intellectual tools and skills. We are versed in it, we're very comfortable in that space. But the types of learning outcomes that exist range from intellectual to interpersonal to psychomotor to affective. There are a number of domain areas that we can consider. And what I find, and you may disagree with me on this, but what I find is that scholars have a difficult time writing outcomes in the affective domain. Valuing, feeling, believing. Okay, so I thought I would give you a particular challenge to write one of these. Here's your scenario. I was watching the news station the other day, and the president of my country, Barack Obama, gave a speech about global warming. He said that this is a trend that affects all trends. Health and wellness of people, environment, water, food security, economic development, all these things, weather, depends in large part on our responsible response to global warming. That's what he said. Now you may believe this or not, but this is our case. And so, as I share with you the affective domain from Bloom's taxonomy, we're going to take a look at it here. The affective domain addresses interests, attitudes, opinions, appreciation, values, and emotional sets. May be used as a basis if the teaching purpose is to change attitudes and behaviors, rather than just transmit or process information cognitively. We're talking about the affective domain, how it affects you, person, your attitudes, your beliefs. And I know that as educators, in addition to enabling our students to process information, we want them to feel. We want them to be passionate about their discipline and passionate about issues. That passion drives their engagement, their constructive engagement with learning process and motivation and with solving real world problems. It's that emotional attachment that enables them to do that as well. We're whole people. Left brain, right brain, cerebral, limbic. So, we have to also be skillful as educators at writing effective domain area outcomes. So, this is intended not necessarily for accreditation, but for quality assurance, quality advancement. How can we improve what we do? So this is part of the advancement discussion. So I have here an effective domain area hierarchy offered up by Bloom to show you that there are ways that we can engage learners in value. So I'm going to leave this up and see if I can blow it up even more so that our colleagues can see it. And I think it should be in your materials. It should have that.
It's in fine print, so we can't read it.
It's in fine print, so I'm going to emphasize the valuing one. We're going to work on this value. Okay, valuing is related to students attaching worth to something. It ranges from their acceptance to their commitment and demonstrating approaches, justifying positions, explaining themselves. Okay, so we have our context. Here's our context. Global warming and the effect it has on native Alaskans, people who live in Alaska. It's been said that their icebergs have been melting, flooding, whole villages have been washed away. What I'd like for you to do is write a learning outcome that enables students to express some form of value as it relates to this issue of global warming and its effects on Alaskans. So give it a try. Take 10 minutes.
So we consider this topic global warming and its effect on Alaska as a topic.
Yes.
And then we say come up with the learning outcomes.
Come up with a learning outcomes that are related to the subject of value. Okay, we're in the valuing domain. We're in affective reaction. And what I would submit to you is that if you can generate personalized learning in such a way that students have affective reactions to what you're saying, it's going to stay with them longer, they're going to remember it, it's going to motivate, inspire learners more to act, to do their projects. This domain is a very powerful one, and yet we don't write a lot of learning outcomes in this area as professors. We just don't. I could look at outcomes of courses and not see them, right? But if you really want to connect with learners at a very personal level, you may want to consider writing for the affective domain. So let me hear from you some of your learning outcomes that you came up with. We have this context. The context is that global warming is affecting native Alaskans. At least that's what some of the data show. And we're hoping to write an effective domain area so that relates to student learning on this subject. So kind of curious to know what you came up with in your activity. Anybody willing to share? Let's go here to here.
Thank you so much. Actually, we have different outcomes. So the student should be first define all the things related to global warming. To identify the causes of global warming. To design preventive measures for global warming. To explain the effect of global warming on human health. To analyze all measures related to global warming.
A lot of outcomes there. The one is describe the effects of global warming on, what was that one? Can you repeat that particular one?
To explain the effect of global warming on human health.
On human health. So he's actually contexted within, so maybe this is a health program, and we're talking about what global warming, the effects that it has on human health and wellness. That may be contextualized within a health program or a medical program. Very interesting example. See what's the effect. Other thoughts on this subject?
أعتقد كما فهمت أن ناتج التعلم يجب أن يوصل إلى الطالب ما يتعلق بالحد من استخدام الوقود الأحفوري الملوث للهواء واستخدام الطاقة البديلة الخضراء والمحافظة على البيئة والحد من التلوث. هذا الناتج الذي يمكن أن يصل إليه الطالب.
So we're talking about resource consumption, but I'm not sure, and maybe it's in translation, what the effective learning outcome is. What you're wanting to, how do you want that student to feel, to sense, to believe? I haven't thought about that one.
We make it short. By the end of this course, the students should be able to vary the right of the human being to live in a clean environment and to appreciate the concept of human living without potential risk of facing danger of changing in climate due to human resource abuse. We use two words, vary and appreciate.
Those really, they do get at it, absolutely. And you know, your understanding sort of the human condition and its effects and appreciating that, the impacts on that, would certainly be in this area, no question about it. Any other thoughts on this subject?
By the end of this session, the student should be able to justify the current concern about this global warming phenomenon on Alaskans, suggest a that may help Alaskian to overcome the negative impact of this phenomenon and to express your opinion on this phenomenon.
Those are all in the valuing domain, absolutely. Yes.
The student will be able to analyze the problem of reluctance. The student will be able to analyze the problem of global warming. The student will be able to design preemptive measures for reluctance.
Analyze is sort of borderline. It is in this domain, but it's sort of borderline. It's still very intellectual, but it is in this domain. You know, and I'll tell you what I wrote. I was trying to play with this myself, and I was trying to take an extreme view of how I might get someone to totally think about this from their own perspective. And so what I did was I situated them there in Alaska. And I said, describe the impact of global warming on you and your family if you lived in Alaska. If you lived there, what impact would this have on you and your family or your lifestyle? So that's sort of the approach I took. I tried to get very close to the person as I could. You and your family live there. And that may be an activity-related outcome more so than a course outcome. But it's in an effective domain. Do you all get a sense for how these might be written? Effective? How do you measure it? Well, how do you measure appreciation? Let's talk about that. How would I measure whether, let's take your outcome. Let's take this for a moment.
The students be able to value the student, number one, the students be able to value the right of human beings to live in a clean environment.
Let's stop that for a minute. To value the rights of human beings to live in clean environments. How might you get at someone's expression of value related to the rights of human beings to live in clean environments? How might you assess that?
I think assignment on this.
What kind of assignment?
I think that
A writing assignment. Okay. So I might have someone do a reflection paper or a writing assignment, some sort of paper that expresses their value. Okay, go ahead.
يمكن قياسه من قياس تأثيره على عدد الحيوانات البرية وتدهورها. يمكن عن طريق قياس نسبة CO2 بالجو، غاز ثاني أكسيد الكربون. وسائل القياس.
You're actually measuring the actual impacts of global warming, but we're saying how do we measure that someone values the situation, right? That's what we're doing, and that is documented. So we have one way of doing that is to have students write about their particular values, beliefs around this, their perception on whether this affects humans or not. And I would use some sort of academic criteria, cogency of argument, depth of argument, breadth of perspective, and that they express their own particular views would likely be some criteria I use to evaluate that paper that they've written, right? So it can be measured.
What about appreciation?
Expression of appreciation. So can you reread, I'm going to ask my colleague to reread the portion of the learning outcome that deals with appreciation.
By the end of this course, students should be able to appreciate the concept of human being living with those potential risks, facing danger of changing climate due to human resource abuse.
Again, this is probably something I would rely on some sort of written paper to do, to express a range of value around this particular issue, I would probably use a written assignment to evaluate their expression of appreciation as well as expression of value.
Okay, can we make it in other way, like organizing a discussion group or a seminar presentation? We let the students go and read about this. For example, the impact of this problem on those who are living in Timor, wherever, and to tell their expression about what happened to those people in a sort of seminar.
So here's a thought. I was just giving this thought as he was talking. It could be that I ask my learners to gather information, prepare arguments, and I split the class in two. Pro, con. And that we're going to spend a class session having a debate on the subject. And it could be that I evaluate their feelings, the cogency of the arguments. It's not that they arrive at a particular outcome. It's that they're able to express their value. And it could be on this side of the room or this side of the room. I'm not saying what side is right. I'm saying express your appreciation and value. So in order to do that, you need to satisfy some lower level outcomes. I want you to actively participate. I want you to do your homework, your research, and then I want you to come and present your case. And we're going to have a debate. And I expect an intelligent, well-supported, coherent, sustained argument from you for your particular perspective. And I can evaluate that using some kind of grading criteria. Did they participate? Did they have these arguments? Did they, And at the end, I could say to the group, did any of your views change? Stand on a line from, I support the issue of addressing global warming to there is no global warming, and let's just stand in line where you stand on this continuum as an expression of your value. That may be a little bit. I'm all about curriculum design. I think, before I pass the microphone, I think there was a comment from the other room. Let me just double check. The comment from the ladies? Okay, I'm going to pass the microphone here. Oh, wait. Yes, go ahead, please. I'm sorry, can you, I didn't get the complete statement. I heard students showing concern over a particular phenomenon. Yes, so the idea is that students can help each other write research on their perspectives on a particular phenomenon. Yes, go ahead.
الطالب زملائه في البحث عن الواقع العكسية أو في عمل بحث مناقشة أو البحث في طريقة معينة أن يسمح الطالب أو الطلاب باهتمامه بهذه الظاهرة.
Okay. Well, you know that one certainly way to engage students in thinking about their values is to have them do it in groups with other students, to prepare their arguments either individually or through a group paper by saying, here's what I believe. I had an opportunity to discuss it with my peers. I know my belief because it's situated maybe different from my peers' belief. So group activities are certainly one way that you can facilitate their engagement, participation. Students can sort of register their level of acceptance to commitment relative to other students in the class through that kind of group activity. So I would agree, whether that's writing a paper by themselves or coming up with a group paper that allows them to work at coming to some consensus together on an issue. That can generate a lot of effective reactions.
Can we use the debate itself for teaching? I mean, not really how we teach how we really teach. You can use the debate itself as a teaching method as well as measurement method for assessment as for teaching goals.
Why not? Because essentially you're saying to the learners, I've given you some information on this subject. You go out and find other information to support your argument, bring it to the class, and share it. It's very likely that what students bring to the class is going to be an enrichment to what you've offered in your materials to them on the subject. If they're good, they're going to go out and collect additional information, they're going to be more relevant information. They may cite the president's speech that was given just a couple days ago, and that becomes new knowledge for its students teaching other students. Right? And this is an approach that's being taken more and more today because students have access to the world store of knowledge in their pockets. They can bring a lot of value to the table on a particular subject. It can be a methodology of instruction. It can be. In fact, a lot of law schools use debate as a form of instruction. They use that, and they use that the other method they employ. So sort of a questioning technique, where you're just asking the learners a lot of questions and giving their responses. Yes, go ahead.
My name is Sultan, and I'm going to visit here in our table here. We discussed all and fulfill the idea of the adaptive. But the question is, we have like, I'm sure we are going to discuss that like in the coming days. How we face the problem that we are facing in the classroom to measure our goals, our objectives, and our students are showing face too much problem to measure what our students get. Are we going to discuss that in the coming days?
Absolutely. So we're going to begin to get into assessment near the end of the session today, and we're going to pick up on that next week. We have to have clarity on the methods of assessment that are available to us, methods of student evaluation and assessment, learning outcome assessment. And we're going to start into that this afternoon, actually, and then we'll build on it next week. I mean, next week, tomorrow. So, thank you. Okay, so we have effective reaction goals, and we've tried our hand at them, which means we've made attempts to write learning outcomes in the affective domain. I think it's a very powerful thing for you to think about the affective domain because it gets at hearts, right? How things affect you, not just intellectually. And if we're into shaping attitudes, values, beliefs, if we're into promoting ethical practice, we need to get here too. Not just here, not just in the mind, but in the heart. And this is a framework for you to think about how you might improve your curriculum in a way that might inspire, motivate, move students emotionally as it relates to your subject, your discipline, certain topics. So that's what, so we've tried our hand at, we've attempted a number of different learning outcome types. So let us move on. So what's next? Now that we've had a chance to rewrite a few outcomes that were vague, we've attempted to do that. We've provided even some advice and counsel to one of our colleagues who had an outcome that we could work on and improve. We've had a chance to write a valuing-based outcome as it relates to global warming. Now what I'd like to do to get us in the mindset of using the ADDIE model, so we've got the analysis, outcome, writing. I want to use the ADDIE model to construct well-designed learning activities. We started getting into these learning activities when we described how we would achieve these learning activities. For example, we talked about the debate, setting up a debate, or having the students write a paper. That's a learning activity, it's an assignment. The debate itself is both a learning activity and an assignment. So now we're going to look at, let's go back to our presentation here. Okay, so we're going to talk about assessment of student learning, and let me see if I can go through this. I lost one of my slides here. I did. I want to talk about designing learning activities. We want our learning activities to be engaging, relevant to the learning, cover the content that we want to cover, and if we're really at our best, the kind of learning activities and assignments that we give students also have an impact on their way of thinking and doing beyond the walls of the academy. Right? They're able to take what they've learned and apply it in the world, whether it's become a better scientist, or to prepare them to be better scientists, or prepare them to be better business people, or to prepare them to be better biologists, or whatever the field is, medical practitioners. The question is, so what? In our design, does it achieve our learning outcomes, and does it prepare them for the ways of thinking, knowing, and doing that is necessary to be effective in the world, given the discipline, right? So we have a couple learning outcomes that we played with today. One is the idea that we have bottled water, a company that sells this product, and that we could use more effective means of promoting it, perhaps through social media. That's one outcome. Another is we have this condition of our planet that's a result of human activity that is affecting climate and health and other in economies. So we have a couple different outcomes we can play with. What I'd like for you to do is take an outcome that we've been working on today at your table and design a learning experience to achieve that outcome. Okay? What kind of learning experience could you design that is engaging and relevant and enables people to think and act beyond this university setting? What kind of learning activity can you create around an outcome? Outcome to learning activity relationship. Any questions about this activity? Pick one of the outcomes that you've been working on. Design a learning experience for your learners. Take about 10-15 minutes. I'll check in with you.
Yeah.